It's a conspiracy, man. It's a conspiracy, man. I'm going to tell you about the truth, man. It's a conspiracy of the Illuminati established by ancient aliens who created whiskey as a type of fuel for their flying saucers. I showed you the evidence right there. Aliens in front of the mash tun. This is the conspiracy fostered by the Illuminati about the ancient aliens, and now it's all a cover-up. And it's trying to be covered up, the truth that I'm going to reveal tonight, covered up by none other than Ralphie and Roy. Absolutely. The whole thing is a scam. This Online Scotch Whisky Awards is all a cover-up about the truth, about the aliens, and I know it's true because I did a whole semester at junior college. Man, I'm telling you, it's which is why I have this aluminum hat on my head, because you can't read your mind if you got aluminum foil on your head. That is the truth. All right, let's get into it. Alrighty. Enough of that. Makes my head sweat. Dan Whiskey Throttle, how you doing, man? Jason Whiskey Wise, how you doing? Long time no see. Pour yourself something. I've been going through Irish whiskeys. Tonight, I would like to kill this bottle, but then it probably wouldn't feel so good in the morning. Bushmills Black Bush, Irish whiskey, high malt content, real nice sherry notes on it, and $30 give or take, really, really nice. This is not one of the nominations for the awards, so I'm feel free to drink it. Now, originally what I wanted to do is say, okay, this is what the nominations are, and here's where my choices. But you know what? Before I do that, I should contact Roy. Just make sure. I don't want to, ruffle any feathers. So I sent an email to Roy. Roy responded, said, well, he and the other guy, Ralphie. Sorry, it's been a long week. He and Ralphie, I need a sip. He and Ralphie are actually going to sort of avoid the nomination, those bottlings, in live streams, videos, and so forth, because they don't want to give any undue influence. They don't want to persuade anyone or be accused of trying to persuade people. And I'm going to do the same. So I will reveal what my nominations were after this whole thing is over in November. So that's what I'll tell everybody. Hey, these were the winners, or here's one of the nominations. Here are the winners, and here are the ones I chose. However, I will reveal one of my nominations that didn't make the list. And I actually had sort of a brain fart on it. It actually didn't meet the category, but we'll get into that in just a minute. So let me know what you guys are drinking here. Pour yourself something if you haven't already. And here's the real introduction to this live stream. So first I got to say, in terms of, if you guys haven't seen it already, you may want to watch Roy's live stream last night before you watch this. I put a link to Roy's live stream in the description box down below. I also put a link to the website down below for the Scotch Whisky Awards so that you can now make your vote in the nominations. So I'm going to discuss the various nominations, the various categories. There are some things I kind of wish would tweak. I will say, hey, I think this should be changed. I think that should be changed. That kind of a thing. Those just my perception. This is the first time doing it. I'm sure there will be tweaks along the way over the years. So I'll just give some of my perceptions. Overall, I got to say, hats off to Roy and Ralphie. I actually kind of thought I had this kind of idea. I kind of had the idea of doing something like this. But the thing is, I'm not the guy to pull this off. If you think in terms of that hellfire brimstone, pounding the pulpit a whiskey person, I'm definitely Ralphie. I may do that a little bit. Ralphie does it in spades. So definitely Ralphie is that sort of oomph, the fire behind it. But Ralphie doesn't have the technical ability. He doesn't have the artistic ability. Roy is an artist. In terms of, if you look at the quality of his live streams, the quality of his videos, the websites, the logos, all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's Roy's gift. So you have two different gentlemen who have very different gifts, and yet there's certain commonalities in terms of their desire for the integrity, transparency, and all that in the Scotch whiskey industry. So they have that in common. Now, if you haven't watched the live stream, definitely watch, because Ralphie has an opinion on things, and he has a different way of expressing them. He definitely gets on the soapbox and lets his opinions known. And I think of him, if it would be anyone, you think of Roy being an evangelist, Ralphie would be like Martin Luther posting his distillery door in Wittenberg. And if you don't know that whole story, forgive me. So before I get on, let me say hello to a few people who have tuned in early. Paul M. Let's go to the chat section and bring them up that way. Tim, thank you very much for tuning in. It says top secret. No, just secrets. Paul M. Ancient aliens drinking whiskey slanja. Absolutely. I see B6. Hello, Erik. Whiskey lovers. Thank you very much for tuning in. Judith, thank you very much for tuning in. Sounds good to me, by the way. Hi, everyone. Let me scroll through real quick. I don't want to spend too much on introductions because people watch us on the replay tend to get annoyed by a lot of hellos to the introductions, but that's one of the advantages. Hey, Jason, Whiskey Wise, man, I haven't seen you in a long time. Hope you're doing well. I know it has got to be really late where you're at over there in jolly old England, but thanks for tuning in. Donner Pass Whiskey, how you doing? Jim Morris, thanks for tuning in. Daniel, Whiskey Throttle. How you doing, sir? From way up north. Thanks for tuning in. And anyway, all right. So I'm going to move on real quick. Sorry if I didn't say hello to Peter White. Thanks for tuning in. Is this Kanan? No, because then I'd have one of those buffalo head hats with the furry thing with the horn sticking off from the side. Anyway, all righty. All right, let's get back into this. All right. So first, kudos to Ralphie and Roy. I can't think of two better people to do something like this. You know, the largest channel is, of course, with Daniel Rex, but I can't see them doing this seriously. This Ralphie and Roy's is a take on a serious thing. I think there's a hope to say, hey, something very different than the way other whiskey awards are done. This is more of a populist vote rather than an industry vote, rather than experts. And it's of the voice of people who are once spending their money, not just someone who are supposed to be experts or people who work in the industry. Because most of the judges are industry people in, like, say, San Francisco Whiskey Awards, that kind of a thing. Nothing against what they're doing. This is just very, very different. This is also giving a tip of the hat, a nod to perhaps a voice that has been overlooked until the COVID era by the whiskey industry. They just sort of patted us on the head at most and say, oh, isn't that nice? Oh, isn't that nice? You have an opinion. Oh, isn't that nice? And the reality is we have a huge impact on people's buying choices. I'm really shocked and surprised at how many people contact me with their email or make comments in the videos and so forth that they made a choice, something that they bought or they didn't buy because of something I said in the video. That makes me to sort of sit up and go, ooh, I really need to do my homework. I really need to pay attention because I am having an influence on people and the purchases they make. Now, the reality is whiskey is far more important to Scotland than any other country. Whiskey is to Scotland what wine is to France, right? France, anywhere you go in France, there's a different wine region. what I said, Loire, Bordeaux, the Languedoc, the Roussanne, Cahors, Champagne, you name it. Every spot, every inch, there's vineyards and wine countries all over France. Same thing with Scotland. Distilleries all over the place. That's a very small country. Now, whiskey is, of course, part of the United States. Bourbon is very, 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 very important. A lot of case law that we know today, applications of law, is based on incidents that came up dealing with bourbon. And so bourbon has had a cultural impact on the United States, but still whiskey, the whiskey, as reflected in the whiskey tuber community, we're very, 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 very small. The whiskey industry, in comparison to wine, is very, 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 very small. The identity, that correlation of identity of to be American associated whiskey isn't there. But when you think of whiskey, Scotland, I mean, it's called Scotch. There's no whiskey in American. Oh, I'm drinking some Irish whiskey, or I'm drinking some Scotch. People don't go, I'm drinking American. No, I'm drinking bourbon, right? So there's no whiskey called American. There is a whiskey called Scotch. So their identity is closely tied to whiskey, and economically, it's extremely important. Before COVID, somewhere around 40,000 people were working in the industry supporting the Scotch whiskey industry and Scotch whiskey tourism, about 40,000 people. Now, for a country that has 1/8 of the population of California, that is absolutely huge. So to them, I think they have a tendency to take whiskey much more seriously than I do. To me, it's a hobby. It's a fun thing. I enjoy it. I'm fascinated by everything that goes into it, but I don't get all worked up about things the way that Ralphie does. All right. So I'm going to go over the various categories that were discussed last night, and all of a sudden my mouse isn't working. Where's my freaking mouse working? I'm going to have to do this manually. Son of a gun. All right. So I'm going to bring up the slides. I'm going to go over the categories. If you want more in-depth information, then you're definitely going to watch or re-watch the live stream. So I watched the entire live stream last night, and I've already re-watched the entire live stream. It was one of the biggest turnouts that Roy and Rafi ever had together. So you're definitely going to want to check that out. Someone has my name. Man, all of a sudden the mouse quit working. All right. So I'm going to go with the slides, and I'm going to there's some points I disagree with, the slides, and so on and so forth. But we'll get into it as we go along. And these are just my opinions. My damn mouse quit working. It needs to be juiced. Yeah, well, all right, next time. So the first category is best entry level Scotch whiskey. In my opinion, this is probably the most important category out of all of them, because people who are aficionados, people who are, well experienced in whiskey, are few. People who are more at the introductory level are large. A big part of the success of the Whiskey Tribe, the Whiskey Vault, and some of the other whiskey tuber channels is that they are reaching people who aren't new to the journey. They are communicating to people who are new to whiskey. My channel, while I try to do it from time to time, I don't have that bent towards that particular consumer base. I'm more about sharing my particular studies of whiskey, and people who want to learn more, you get a little geekier, then they're watching my channel. The early videos of the Whiskey Vault where Daniel had a lot more content. He had a lot more geeky information, and he would go on these little lectures about this, that, and the other thing. Well, Rex seemed to feign interest. But if you go back and watch the early videos, there was a lot more content there. And I think they kind of realized to reach the entry-level community or part of the consumers, they needed to be a lot more entertainment side, a lot more goofier, and if people happen to learn something along the way, then they learn something. All right. So these are the slides off of last night's live stream. However, I added the average cost in the United States. They didn't. They put everything in pounds. So I added everything in the United States. What I did was I looked at the range of the prices, and I went from the very lowest price to the very highest price, and then the price I put on this is in the middle. So the first is for a best entry-level Scotch whiskey, Ardbeg 10-year-old, 46% alcohol by volume, 45 pounds. I put 55 USD. It used to be around $46. I've seen it around $60. So right smack dab in the middle is $55. Now, if you guys been watching me for a while and you know me, I ain't gonna tell you which, but out of this whole lineup, which do you think would probably be my favorite? All right, Aaron, 10-year-old, 38 pounds or 66 US dollars. I have tasted this, but I haven't gone through a bottle of this. I just picked up a bottle. This is apparently it's getting difficult to get a hold of. However, a place called the Bottle Barn here in Santa Rosa, California, they had a few bottles, so I grabbed one. Don't know when I'll get around to reviewing it, but I don't have enough in-depth experience. So Ardbeg 10, I've probably gone through maybe 5 bottles of that. Aaron, I've tasted it, but I've not gone through a bottle. So there's a difference in forming an opinion, I think, and casting your nominations. There's a difference between you've tasted something versus you've gone through a bottle of it. And a lot of whiskey tubers, I do 60 some odd reviews a year, right? So one a week on average, plus a few extras. Probably do more. I probably do maybe closer to 70. So you can only nominate what you've tasted. So I've been a whiskey tuber for 6 years. It takes 6 times 60. That's 360 bottles. I'm just on average. It's sure it's more than that. It's probably closer to 400 that I have tasted and reviewed. I've been to whiskey events. I've tasted whiskey at other places. So I have a knowledge of more about whiskeys than what I've reviewed. But in terms of an in-depth understanding and knowledge of a whiskey, it's got to be something I've reviewed and gone through. So if you have these 24 whiskey tubers who are contributing to their nominations, one of the questions I have is, I'm going to take myself off the picture here real quick so as I continue to talk through this. So one of the questions I have is, so they got 24 whiskey tubers. I don't think they should choose whiskey tubers based on the size of a channel, but I think whiskey tubers should be chosen based on a perception of dedication to the craft of being a whiskey tuber. Dedication to the craft of being a whiskey tuber. So Whiskey Central, Shayla, she's doing fantastic. She's fairly new. I think she's got over 4,000 subscribers. She filled the reins for Roy when he was on vacation. She has a lot of enthusiasm. I've been impressed with her knowledge. She's extremely young. I'm old. I'm not extremely old, but I'm older. I'm 50, at least half my age. She's probably less than half my age. But she's definitely shown a dedication to learning and growing in whiskey. So even though she's a fairly new channel, I think she was definitely a good candidate. And this is for somebody else to figure out. Personally, I think there needs to be some sort of demonstration of dedication that you're not a fly-by-night, here today, gone tomorrow whiskey tuber or bloggers or some other media. There have been a lot of whiskey tubers who have come and gone for whatever reason. Some, maybe they had other priorities, family, work, whatever else. Maybe they couldn't afford it. Maybe they didn't have the time for it. Maybe they just kind of go, you know what, this isn't for me. Whatever, and that's fine. But I would say the washout rate of people who don't last more than a year or so, I would estimate 80%. My numbers could be off. Just when I start, whatever happened to so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. So, I mean, Bourbon Insane, Chris, great guy. Still friends with him on Facebook. Every once in a while, I'll send him a message. But he's not doing it anymore. And I think he's got a lot of little ones. He's got little kids. I think he bought a new house and they bought a farm, right? I miss having him around. I think he was a quickly rising star in the whiskey tuber world, but he moved on. So I think in order for someone to be a nominator, show a dedication level by their output of what they do. I don't know if you want to set a year, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, 5 years, or just a matter in terms of the intensity of what they're doing. What they're doing is not half-ass. I would say, and again, that takes more than one person doing the evaluation of it. Someone who isn't just doing a half-ass job, because the reality is I skim through YouTube channels looking at more whiskey tubers, and I see a lot of half-ass work, and they won't stick around. They won't last. I see a lot of whiskey tuber channels that someone hasn't posted in 6 months. They haven't posted in a year. How many videos they got? 10, 15, 20, and then they quit. And nothing wrong with that. There's no moral failure or requirement that once you start, you have to keep going. But I think someone who's going to be nominating from our community, it needs someone who has, in some form or fashion, in some way, shown a certain level of dedication. Doesn't mean that if you're not being a whiskey tuber, you don't have a valued opinion. But you can put your opinion in the election process later on. Oh, hey, Ron Gurgley, thank you much for tuning in. So you know what? My chat thing is not scrolling. So I had to, there's something going on here. My chat thing isn't scrolling, so I had to manually move it down. So let me bring that down. Nope, comments. All right, I don't have a Glencairn, so sorry. Every time a Glencairn rings, an angel gets its wings. Thank you very much for the donation. All right. Man, there's always a technical problem. Today, it's the stupid mouse not working. All right, so let's get back into the category. Get back in the category. So I'm not the one to set the standard. I'm not the one to create the criteria for who should be a nominator and who shouldn't. But I think someone should prove a certain sense of a combination, probably knowledge, maturity, dedication, and all the rest of it. All the attributes that should be there for someone who is a nominator and not just a voter at the end. All right, I'm going to move on. That's just my 2 cents on that one, and someone might completely disagree with me on that one. All right, let's move to the next one. Oh, no, let's get back to this. All right. Bunnahabhain 12, I've gone through probably 2 of those. One of the earlier bottlings and this one, $55 US. It's another whiskey I absolutely love. The Deanston 12-year-old, $52 here in the United States. Another excellent dram. Glencadam 10-year-old. I've had Glencadams from minis. I've not had a full bottle. I need to rectify that situation. And the Highland Park 12-year-old. It's kind of surprised. People poo-poo Highland Park a lot. I'm kind of surprised that's on there, particularly since people are sort of burnt out, I think, a little bit on the Viking hype. But that it's only at 40% ABV. I'm kind of surprised at that one being on the list. Now, one of the other things regarding what makes the list and what doesn't make the list, exit full screen. All right. Man, not having my mouse working is makes a little challenge. All right. So one of the things I want to do tonight, if you go back and watch the live stream and watch it with the chat on, there are a lot of complaints. People are complaining about this because there's people always bitch, moan, going to complain. They had nothing better to do. Why isn't this bottle on there? 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 Why isn't that producer? Why isn't that producer? Why is that distillery? Look, there's 130 some odd distilleries in Scotland. Each of them putting out, let's say on average, 5 core range. It's on average, some more, some less. There's always going to be someone left off the list when you only have, maybe 5 or 6 candidates and nominations possible on there, right? So there's always someone who's going to have hurt feelings that their favorite whiskey or their favorite distillery or independent bottler or whatever else doesn't make the list. Some of these, I think, when I went through, at the end of the video, when we went through all the different categories, every category, for the most part, had whiskeys that I have had and enjoyed and I agreed with them being on the list. Were there others that I thought should be on the list that weren't on the list? Yes. Did all my nominations make it to the list? No. Did a lot of my nominations make it to the list? Yes, but not all of them did. So the other thing is, well, I can't get that here. One of the criteria is they're talking about affordability, quality, integrity, and availability. Go watch the live stream. They go through all the various criteria that they're looking for in order to be nominations. And I goofed a couple of times in what I nominated. It didn't actually meet the criteria. I can't get that whiskey here. I hear this all the time. When I review, I do a lot of, I know, hard to find whiskeys or whiskeys that are only available at the distillery. I do a lot of that stuff. But my suggestion, if you see a whiskey that's nominated and it's not available to you, there's a number to call. 1-800-WAH. I'm sorry. Welcome to planet Earth. One of the things is, if you're going to nominate only a whiskey that is ubiquitous, that is available everywhere, guess what you're going to end up with? You're going to end up with whiskeys that are the mass produced, that are at 40% ABV, that appeal to the mass market. And then you're going to complain about the quality. Oh, that's not so good. There's so many better whiskeys. Look, it's a matter of math. When you increase quantity, quality control becomes more and more difficult to manage. When you produce a mass quantity, your choice in what you're choosing in terms of casks or grains gets less selective, because the best casks and the best grains, or in the wine world, the best grapes, become less and less available to produce your whiskey. So you get less picky about what you're using in terms of casks or in grains, quality of barley, when you have to meet the requirement of producing a mass amount to make that whiskey available to everyone. So you got a choice. You got to come. So where can you have a happy midway between availability and quality, right? And there are whiskeys I can get. I'm surprised how often I can find a Springbank here in California that they can't get in the UK. But I still haven't found the Ardbeg 8-year-old, right? Now, if I really wanted to go on the hunt, I could find it, but I'm not going to find it at a local store or anywhere in California. I'm going to have to buy it from overseas and have it shipped over and pay up the wazoo in order to get that bottle. But if I really want, I could. Which brings the next point, which is the reality is many of these whiskeys, if you can't get them at your local store, there's this thing. I don't know if you've heard about it. Have you heard about it? It's called the internet. There's this thing called Google. Maybe you've heard about it, right? Google it. I would say, I don't know, maybe 75% of the bottles I buy online. Hey, it's Bill the Whiskey Dick. How you doing, man? Bill, if you want to come on, let me know. I'll send you a link. I'd like to get your 2 cents as well. So Bill, if you want to come on, let me know, and I'll send you a link. So there is the interweb. Is that information superhighway thing? Yes, the interwebs. I remember George Bush talking about the interwebs, the xxx.com thing. So availability and quality, the more there's available, because you're producing massive quantities and have wide distribution, quality's gonna go down because of your selectivity of casks. You're gonna get less picky about your casks and your grains. It's just the way it is. But mass produce, lesser quality, but more availability, also tends to go cheaper. So for a mass produced whiskey that's affordable and readily available, I like Johnnie Walker Black. And Johnnie Walker Black, although the green made it on, but it's a more expensive bottle. But Johnnie Walker Black, $30 and under, didn't make the list. That was one that I thought should have made one on the list, but that's just my opinion. Bill says I'm looking skinny. No. I shaved my beard off. I gained a chin. It doesn't make me skinny. I might have lost a couple pounds, but no, I'm not getting skinny. I'm exercising though. I bought a bicycle. I'm going out for bicycle rides in the vineyards. I go for walks, stuff like that. So I'm getting more. Yeah, the beard takes off a few pounds. All right. So let me get back to the list here. So all of these, I would say give an absolute thumbs up. The Highland Park is the only one on there that I raise a question about. The rest of them are absolutely solid. This is one of the most important categories because we're talking about entry level, but also it's one of the toughest categories because the competition is so stiff. Now, one of the things about this is, one of the things about this is, I'll take this back off and this is the Online Scotch Whisky Awards. They should have stuck to Scotch throughout this whole thing. We're going to see some non-Scotches on there. They should have stuck to Scotch. They should have stuck to Scotch. They should have stuck to Scotch. Or, this would have been my preference, just called the Online Whiskey Awards. You didn't need to put in the word Scotch. You did not need to put in the word Scotch. Either have all Scotch and nothing but Scotch, or take out the word Scotch in the title. That's just my opinion. But that's my perspective. What do you guys think? I would like to know what you think about that. Do you think, hey, the Whiskey Friend, how you doing, man? Think we got it wrong with Highland Park 12. Just to read comments real quick. All right. I think it should have been Online Whiskey Awards, not Online Scotch Whisky Awards. Would you agree? Okay. So Cohen says, I agree. This should have been all Scotch Whisky Awards. Okay. Let me bring him up real quick. Okay. He thinks it should have been all Scotch Whisky Awards. I think it should have been all Scotch, not because I think only Scotch should be within the nominations, but it would fit the title. That's my only issue. Either change the title or change what's you're able to contribute. That's it. That's my only issue with that. Because there are whiskey tuber channels that 99% or even 100% what they do is bourbon, and that's fine. There are channels, Ken Pie. Have you guys watched Ken Pie? Ken Pie, I'm probably mispronouncing it. Ken Pie Planet. Fantastic channel. Roy just had him on. He does like all Japanese whiskeys, and I think some other Japanese beverages as well. Fantastic channel. Great communicator, great videos, real high quality in terms of everything he does. Absolutely fantastic. Eventually, I will do another series on, and I'll do one on Japanese whiskey eventually, but I know the quality of my videos is not going to match what his are. If you haven't seen his, definitely check it out. Cameron Lochner says definitely Online Whiskey Awards. Yes. Okay. Now check this out. I wish the chat thing worked better. Yes, and put the E in there with the whiskey in parentheses or whatever. Right. Totally agree with that. So, what was I saying? I lost my track. I need to pour some more whiskey. That's what I was going to do next. So the other thing is, so it should have been one or the other. Now, if you're a bourbon person, you want to do a bourbon awards. This is my question. Is there someone in the bourbon tuber community who could pull off what Ralphie and Roy are doing, the same quality, the same balance? Because there's a lot more going on behind the scenes than, if you're not a whiskey tuber, you don't know what it takes to put in. There's so much behind the scenes stuff that go. When I put out a 8-minute video, 10-minute video, there's 3 to 4 hours of work behind it, at least. I know Roy has been working like a dog to create everything, set everything up, give everything standards. I know the depth of conversation was they're trying to cover all their bases to make sure everything as much as possible is done right. That's what they're working on. Well, what about this? Well, you think we should do that? No, we shouldn't. Well, I think we should do this. No, I don't think we should. And there's those kind of conversations. I just know those conversations go on. So there's a lot of work to then finally say, okay, let's launch this thing. And there's a little bit of because you're going to be watched by the whiskey world. And if you screw it up, they're going to go, pff, right? They're going to go, pff, these whiskey tubers are a freaking joke, right? And because Roy and Rafi are the first to ever do something like this, then they're putting themselves out there as a model for others to follow and perhaps improve on, but they're also sticking their necks out, their reputations out. And will they and the rest of us be taken seriously by the whiskey industry is going to be affected by what they do? And that's huge, especially since, Rafi being just the pulpit pounder, right? Take another sip. So, again, as I said before, kudos to them. However, I think some improvements need to be made. And one is, and I don't know if they could, okay, you've already got the word Scotch in the title. Can we go back and next year and just call it Whiskey Awards without the word Scotch in there? I don't know. But I don't think if you're expecting other people to start a bourbon thing and it'd be on par with what they're doing, Bourbon Awards, and yet it'd be all YouTubers or all non-industry, right, and have that kind of level of integrity. And who's got the time for that kind of stuff? I mean, don't get me wrong, Bourbon Junkies do a fantastic job. Matt over at ADHD Whiskey's doing a fantastic job. Whole lot of other, Jason C is the bomb. Mash and Drum is absolutely fantastic. And then there's Drum and Drams. I think he's new, but he's doing a fantastic job. But is there someone with the capabilities other than, say, Daniel and Rex? I think Daniel and Rex could do it, but they're such goofballs. They might be too much. They might have their feet too deep in the industry. You know what I mean? Because they have a distillery and a school, and you know what I mean? But I don't know. They could, but I think administratively and organizationally, could they do it? Hell yes. Hell yes, they could do it. So if the bourbon people wanted to do something, this is just my 2 cents. The biggest bourbon channels get together, say, hey, let's do a bourbon version, form a committee, get together, organizationally, talk to Roy and Rafi. Hey, give us some input as to how you orchestrated this. Create then a template based on what they're doing with the Scotch Whisky Awards, Online Scotch Whisky Awards. Create sort of a template that you could sort of, create and maybe tweak a little bit, and then do the same thing with bourbon. That would be my suggestion. Get some input for them, and organizationally, and promote and and all that kind of stuff. I think Daniel and Rex would be a great behind the scenes influence, or be able to help give guidance on how to do something like that. But this is just my 2 cents. One of the challenges, because I think Daniel Rex are so big that if they did something, it would just seem like, oh, this is a Whiskey Vault thing. It's just a Whiskey Vault thing. I think people tend to write them off right away. By the way, I'm a big fan. Wearing a Crowded Barrel shirt tonight. All right, let's move on. And this is going to get long, man. Next slide. If you guys disagree with me, if you agree with me, let me know. Feel free. Best blended Scotch whiskey. This one surprised me. You have 3 Compass Box. Compass Box Flaming Heart, blended malt, $130 US. Compass Box Spice Tree, definitely a love of mine, as well as the Extravaganza. Extravaganza is not on here, but if you don't know, Compass Box Extravaganza is sort of the bigger brother, more intense flavor, higher quality, but also more expensive version of Spice Tree, $65. Now, again, the prices can vary. I've seen this go all the way up to $90. Again, Compass Box, the Peat Monster. So I've reviewed the Peat Monster and Spice Tree. I've tasted the Flaming Heart, but I have not reviewed it. Cutty Sark Prohibition Blended Scotch, 58% ABV, $42. I have not had this one, so can't really give my 2 cents on that one. Douglas Lang Scallywag. I have not had this one, $55. Johnny Walker Green Label Blended Malt, 15-year-old. This one surprised me being on it because it's at 40% ABV. I think it might be at 43 here in the United States. Someone feel free to correct me. for $60. So the only ones I've only had 2 out of this line. Well, reviewed. Well, actually, I've only, I think, reviewed 2 and only tasted total 3 out of these. Best blended Scotch whiskey. Now, the funny thing about this one is none of these, as far as my understanding of the category, are the go-to off-the-shelf liquor store types. You know, when I think of blended whiskey, maybe it's because, you know, we as whiskey tubers, I mean, how often do we as whiskey tubers review blended whiskeys? All right. Of those who focus on Scotch, I would say 98% is on single malts. And so we don't do a lot of blended Scotch, let alone single grain, some of these other categories. Because I think viewership, because single malt is the hot ticket, I think viewers aren't going to be as inclined to watch the blended videos, blended Scotch videos. And so we don't review them. And my perception of blended Scotch is that generally speaking, they're mass-produced, pretty homogenized, good for cocktails, or when you're not going to have to think about the whiskey, right? It's just you pour in your glass, you don't think about it, you're doing something else. IC86 says, yes, Johnny Walker Green Label is 43% here in the USA. All right, thank you very much. Christopher Malloy says, conflating blended Scotch with blended malts really was a mistake. Absolutely. So, okay, let me bring that comment up there. Excellent comment. So I gotta find the comment so I can find it. I can bring it up. Where'd you go? Now I'm trying to find this. There you go. There you go. Conflating blended Scotch with blended malts was a mistake. I think it was confusing. Well, first of all, a blended Scotch has grain whiskey in it, typically has grain whiskey in it. A blended malt, in terms of the palate and nose, it's just like a single malt. It just comes from more than one distillery, but it's a 100% malt whiskey. Whereas typically a blended malt has grain whiskey. It could have corn, wheat, something else like that. There aren't a ton of blended malts out there or readily available. There are a lot of blended Scotch whiskeys. Somehow 90% of what gets produced out of Scotland is blended Scotch. And I would say a large percentage of that is going into cocktails. A lot of that is sort of the mass market, high production, widely available whiskeys. When I get on an airplane and I want a whiskey, it's either going to be a bourbon or a blended Scotch. Those are your two choices, right? You're not going to see single malts on an air. I've never seen a single malt on an airplane. When I'm flying, I'm nervous drinking, so I'm happy with either one. I tend to get a bourbon. I tend to go for a bourbon, go for a wild turkey when I'm flying. So I actually agree with you. But here's the issue, Christopher. How many viewers know the difference between a blended Scotch and a blended malt? I know the whiskey tubers do. But what about the voters, the mass quantity of people who are going to be voting now that all the nominations are? How many of them know the difference between a blended Scotch? I may be underestimating the average voter. So I could be wrong. But my perception is if you were to ask everybody who's a part of the whiskey tribe, right? Go to the Facebook channel. They got 50,000 people in that group. I would wager that the vast majority of them do not know the difference between a blended Scotch and a blended malt. They're not going to know. They're not going to know. Just based on the type of questions they repeatedly ask. I'm a member of the group. I don't watch that much anymore just because on Facebook group, just because it's a lot of drama. Nothing against anybody in the group. It's not my scene. I just finally got around to it's not my scene. They're really not. It's really 8th grade. They're at the 8th grade level. That's just the way it is. All right. Then it's our job to educate them. Christopher Malloy, Malloy, not Valoy. Malloy, absolutely. It is. It is. But when the vast majority of the channels that they're going to watch are more 90% entertainment with very little education, how do you do that? Most people, all they want is something that tastes good, something that gives them the buzz on, and a channel that's entertaining. That's it. That's it. And this is reality, right? That's why my channel is at 12.8 thousand and other channels at 30, 40, 50, 60,000. I'm not as entertaining as some other channels, and not against them. I think they're doing a fantastic job. I find them entertaining. I like to watch them. I watch them. I watch every day. I watch the Whiskey Vault when they put up videos. I find them entertaining. That's why I watch them. I watch for entertainment, just like everybody else does, right? That's why I watch, because I want to be entertained too. I think the Bourbon Junkies are freaking hilarious. I think Trinity and C are freaking hilarious. Now, Trinity and C do get a little geekier, but they're not one of those huge channels. So anyway, to get to the point is, I agree with the category potential confusion with the average voter. So that's the only thing about that one. All right, let's get on to the next one. So somebody remind me to plug my mouse in after this live stream. That's the reason I have to lean forward to use the pad rather than using the damn best distillery. Best distillery. Arran, Isle of Arran. Oh, I got to take. Sorry, hold on a second. I'll leave it up there for now. Hold on. Son of a gun. Meant to take. Sorry. Give me a second here. I need to take that comment off. There we go. All right, there we go. All right, best distillery. So I have been to all of these distilleries. Oh, nope, I haven't been to Glenallachie. So Isle of Arran Distillers, Brooke Alati Distillery, Bunnahabhain Distillery, Deanston Distillery, Glenallachie Distillery, and Springbank Distillery. So we have one on the Isle of Arran, 2 on Islay, 2 Highland, and 1 Campbelltown. The only one I've been to Glenallachie. I'm hoping, Lord willing, to be able to go back to Scotland for my 3rd trip in May 22, but we'll see. If not, then in 23. This is a tough one. Now, I'm not going to tell you who my candidate was, but the one that I voted for and nominated is in this list. But I'm not going to tell you who it was. Not until November, until the votes are final. Then I'll tell you. But this is a really tough. So Arran, the labeling, the quality, they have a larger selection than you know, because they do seem to do a lot of experimentation and a lot of unique bottlings that are only available at the distillery. If you visit the distillery, which is on the northern side of Arran, on the south end of Isle of Arran is Lag, which is their sister distillery, which is fairly new. If you visit the distillery, they have a cool cafe. They have really good food. Lacranza Castle is right down the road. The Roans is right down the road. And when you do a tour and you get to do a tasting and you get to choose, you're like, holy cow, I never knew they had so many bottlings. So there are a lot of rare bottlings to bring home if you ever visit the distillery. Really cool place to visit. Brooke Ladi. They're not my favorite on Islay. I like them. I enjoyed the tour. I like the whiskeys, but they're not my favorite. Bunnahabhain is one of my favorites. I think you guys know 2 of my favorites on Islay are Ardbeg and Bunnahabhain. Um, the 12, and particularly the 12-year-old is one of my favorites. I like the quality of the whiskeys. I like the variety they have. I like that they're very distinct from all other Isla producers. I've heard there's a lot of controversy currently going on about a particular new release they have. I don't know if you heard about it. I guess it's at 40% ABV. If you watch the video with Roy and Ralphie, Ralphie goes on a bit of a rampage about it. Deanston. Really enjoyed visit to Deanston. I know Roy's a big fan. Glenallachie. You know what? I haven't reviewed any Glenallachies. I've tasted a few. Haven't been to the distillery. I'm sort of waiting. There's a lot of buzz going on about Glenallachie. There's a lot of hype going on due to the changeover from Glendronach over to Glenallachie in terms of the way production is being done and who's behind it. Springbank is the old school distillery, still doing anything without any machinery, but their old school way of doing things limits them on the quantity that they can put out. They are a quality over quantity with a very distinctive profile, but because they don't have any computers, because they don't have any mechanization, because everything's done by hand, that reduces the quantity that they are capable of putting out. The only computer they have, I believe, is for running the cash register, and that's it. So when people bitch and moan, groan, and complain about Springbank and they can't get this, they can't get that, well, it's because they're old school, and old school doesn't have the ability to mechanize and put out the quantity that other distilleries do. So pick a choice. Pick one. Quality over quantity, right? You remain old school or compromise and start putting out greater quality. Because as soon as they were to mechanize and start doing it in faster production, start putting out higher quantity, and the quality would slip, then people would start, oh, what happened to Springbank? Oh, it's not as good as it used to be. Okay, so quit your bitching about non-availability and just, hey, that's the way it is. Things that tend to be of higher quality and are better tend to be less available. That's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. Okay, sorry. And when you have less quantity, what does that do? Everybody knows. Then the prices go up, right? And then people are going to bitch about that. Aquavite says, these are the secrets. I got to know. Roy, if you didn't catch the beginning, you got to go back and watch the beginning. You got to watch the beginning. You got to watch the beginning of this. I did this whole alien thing anyway at the beginning. So it is. No. So tough choice there in terms of the best distillery. Again, why wasn't this distillery? What? If you read the comments, watch on the replay. I watched the live stream and then I've watched the replay in its entirety. So I've seen it twice. There's a lot of bitching, moan, groaning, complaining going on in the chat. And why isn't Tobermory on there? Why isn't this still? Look, if you got 130 Scotch distilleries, let's say they just said Scotch distillery and own a Scotch distillery, you got 130 of them. Whatever 5 or 6 they put on the list, you're going to be disappointed. Someone's going to be disappointed that their favorite distillery isn't on there. Ardbeg's not on there, right? I'm a big fan of Ardbeg. Glengoyne's not on there, right? There's a lot of other distilleries that I really, really like that aren't on there. Guess what? So if you only have 5 or 6 people on the team, someone's not going to make the team. But you do have the ability. But you have the... Okay, Roy says, no bitching, all valid. Whiskey tugs at your heartstrings. It's very emotive. It's whining. It's complaining. Wah, wah, wah. Roy, if you want to come on, I'll send you a link. I'm sure you're busy. Thanks for tuning in, Roy. It's planning. It's whining. Just be thankful we got whiskey. This is one of the things. We are living in the golden era of whiskey. The quality, quantity, and availability of all the bitching about availability. The fact that I know these whiskey producers exist is all because of the internet. The only reason why I get access to these is because of the internet, right? If we were in the 1980s, I wouldn't know about 75% of these whiskeys. I wouldn't be able to get them. I wouldn't be able to order them because the only place I'd be able to get whiskeys is at the local store. That would be what I could get, period, unless I traveled or somebody told me about it through snail mail. Oh, okay. Let me get you a link. Get an invite. All right. Give me a second here. I'm going to send you a link, Roy. Give me a second. The only reason why that we know these bottlings that exist is because of the internet. Now, but this is one of the things. I've this sounds funny. So I'm 55 years old, and I've been working with people who are less than. Oops, that's great. Wait. On. Sorry. I've been working with people who are half my age. All right, Roy, I just sent you a link. I've been working with people who are half my age. They've never owned a CD. They've never known a world without the internet. When I was a kid, we had a television with 12 channels, no cable, and an antenna thing on the roof, and you wanted to get better reception. You turned the thing and it went, right? We had LPs, right? Cassette tapes. If you listen to music in your car, you had a cassette tape, and if you wanted to get to a song you liked, you had to fast forward it or rewind to get to where you wanted it, right? You had to pick up a needle and move it to where you wanted it. We had 8-track players. Okay. People in the modern era, people don't know how good they got it. Availability, if you can pay for the shipping, right, and all that, and if you spend some time searching, for the most part, you can get anything you want, unless there's some other problems, unless it's some other legal problems. I think most people's problem with availability has to do with their laws. If you're living in Canada and all you can get is everything's government controlled and state controlled, I really feel for Rob, Whiskey and Six, and Sipper Social Club, and Trinity and C, and the others up there in Canada, that they have problems getting stuff sometimes because of the government. If you're in Ohio, which controls prices, oh, good, they control, man, they can make it more affordable, but they have less availability. So they tend to go over the border to some other state in order to get what they want, right? So all I can say is you have to make a choice. Availability is basically based on the quantity that's produced and distribution, right? And that's it, right? So I am fortunate. Now, I live in the wine country, right? Vineyards, wineries right over here, right? Surrounded by mountains and vineyards. It's not a whiskey place. The local stores here have an okay selection. There is no Total Wine here where I live. Peter White, we have Alberta, and they have everything. Peter White, well, congratulations. I don't know what's availability in Alberta. By the way, I have a whiskey from Alberta, but I haven't got around it. One of these days, I'll do a whole thing on Alberta. All right. So, all right. So, what is here's another thing, and another complaint. I know I'm dealing with everybody's complaints. Let's move on to the next section. Another complaint is prices. You know what? One of the challenges of saying how much something costs, prices, if you're in a controlled state, then you're going to get cheaper, but you have less availability. Prices vary a lot. They can vary as much as $50 on a bottle. When I put the prices on these slides, I've added the slides. I've taken the low end and the high end in the United States and then chosen a middle price. So if it's $60, between $60 and $80, I'm putting $70, right? That's what I'm putting for USD price. That's one of the challenges. All right, let's go to the next one. Best grain. Okay, this is the one I had a brain fart on. Okay, this is in my nomination. My nomination's on here because I had a brain fart. All right, let's go through these. Baines Cape Mountain grain, $29. I was like, wow, $29. I was searching online. I think I'm going to check this one out. I've not had this. I never even heard of this. Balcones True Blue. I have the other Balcones Blue. It's a light blue color. I'm not a big fan of it. I've tasted this one. It's okay. Compass Box Hedonism. Absolutely fantastic whiskey. It definitely did come on my mind. Compass Box is really doing really, really well here. Teeling, single grain. Look at the price on this. Teeling, single grain, Irish whiskey, 46% ABV, $35. I have reviewed it. I really like it. Out of the entire core range of Teeling, I think it's two of the most that I recommend. I would recommend the small batch, which tends to be even under $30, and the single grain because of the casking that they use. Now, but here's okay. Now let's go on to Wild Turkey 101 and Wild Turkey Rare Breed as the other two choices. Let me see if Roy's popped in yet. Oh, here he comes on. All right, Roy, just 1 second. I'm going to bitch, moan, go and complain while you're not on the screen. All right. Here's reality. I'll take the slide off and I'll bring Roy on. Okay. This was not planned, by the way. I did not know Roy was going to be popping in here. I am surprised. He is. All right. Let's bring him in. How you doing, sir? Hold on. How you doing, sir? Can you hear me? Hold on. Did I mute you? Are you muted? Hold on. No.
Yeah, it's becoming a bit of a thing that I do now when I go live. The mic's always muted. Can you hear me now?
I hear you, sir. Hey, how you doing, man? Great to see you.
It's good to see you. How are you keeping, Erik? You doing well?
It's my biggest challenge right now is staying in whiskey and not wandering off back to wine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I live on a golf course. There's a winery right down the road. I live off the Sonoma Wine Trail. I'm surrounded by wineries and vineyards.
So your heartstrings are being tugged as well, right?
Yeah, it's like an old girlfriend. You're just about to get married. You're you're just about to get married, and an old girlfriend. Bum 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 bum, and you're like, oh man, I have some hearing ears. It's similar. Anyway, I am staying true to the faith. I'm keeping the faith. Still doing whiskey, but I got a bicycle and I go out to the wine country and I drive in the vineyards. It's harvest time. The grapes are there. You can smell the grapes. You can smell they're crushing them. They're pressing them right off. They're doing harvest right now. It's so romantic. It's just anyway. All right, let's get back to whiskey.
I think that would be great fun if I ever did come back out, because you know that it was in the wine country in California that I get engaged.
Temecula.
Yeah, it's quite a bit further south from where you are. Of course.
And I understand it. That's actually where I started in the wine industry, and I actually worked a little bit at a winery up in the hill country above Temecula.
Yeah, that was it was 2000. We were out there, and everyone. I think a lot of folk know Bill, my friend Bill.
Yeah,
he's popped up in a couple of streams and videos and things. Yeah, Bill, Whiskey Disciple, and I was out seeing him. So it was 21 years ago now. My goodness, and yeah, we went up in a hot air balloon. We did the whole tourist thing, and I proposed. Beaverburn is saying Roy mutes himself like a true boomer. You're not wrong there, buddy. You're not wrong. The audio is the biggest challenge.
Have you poured yourself anything, or what you doing?
Yeah, I've actually had a busy day today, catching up on a lot of things, and I met a couple of folks that were visiting. Helen and Andy from down south, Helen Widdowson. So we went up to Deanston together, and I brought home a wee dram. But I don't want to. Deanston have been nominated, right, in the Osmonds.
I know.
And so
I talked about that earlier. Yeah. So I'm not
reluctant to talk about any whiskey that's been nominated. Right. I'm going to be careful about this whole thing. It's because it's attracting huge amounts of positivity. It's really exciting and fun and energizing things, and kind of given so much relevance to this little piece of digital real estate that we occupy and we love so much. We hold it so dear, right? But it's also attracting a lot of, as I've kind of picked up as I dropped in on your stream tonight. I didn't know you were doing it tonight, buddy. You might have told me, and I just switched on the machine and I saw the notification.
So I sent Roy an email with my idea that here's my list versus what the nominations are. And Roy responded, well, they're trying to avoid talking about those so not to have undue influence. And I thought, you know what, you're absolutely right, 100%. So I will do my list after the voting and all that stuff is over. And I'll say, here's who the winners were and here were my choices. However, I'm going to share one I put in, which I did which is I had a brain fart. So I had one brain fart in terms of one of my nominations because it didn't meet the criteria, and that's why it's a brain fart. If I bring up real quick. Oh shoot.
Well, if you want to talk about anything that's not made it through, but it's not out for public voting, then that's kind of a softer option. I mean, obviously, they still have the ability to vote for people's choice. So
right. But mine didn't
anything mine could be influencing things. But so you have to kind of apply a wee bit of rationale to this. But if it's voted for over the next 4 weeks while the vote is live, I'm going to try to make an effort not to be seen to kind of lead the thing. I'm really disappointed because a lot of things that I voted for or a lot of things that I nominated didn't make it through.
Really?
How can anybody not be celebrating Anok? How can anybody not be celebrating the transformation at Glenturret and things? But what you have to realize is so many of the dynamics here, Eric, that I think you were touching on a wee bit, is the time it takes for a release to make it out to the wider market, and the time it takes. There's a delay there, and for people to pick it up and engage with it, and especially for it to make it out to North America.
I was surprised you had Balcones.
Sorry?
I was surprised you had Balcones.
Well, the Balcones that we have is a single malt, and it's not specific to any batch, and the True Blue, right? But these are here, and we can buy these. We can pick them up and buy them here now, and they've been here for a wee while now. So that's kind of good. I mean, we pay a bit more, obviously, than you guys do there. It's just the way of it. Right. But they are here, and they are getting attention. But you've worked out, you know, that what we do is, it doesn't really see borders, right? It doesn't really. It's wonderful that we can all connect from everywhere, wherever we are. The problem is, it's not always easy to buy the same whiskey at the same price. So there has to be caveats all over the place with this thing. It's fraught with difficulty and complications for sure. Right. So I missed you mentioned earlier when I tuned in, you said you should see the start where you did an alien.
I obviously by my thumbnail I got the alien on there, so I just started with this whole alien theme at the beginning. It's just for a laugh, at the beginning. So go back and watch the beginning later on. So the grain whiskey that I put up there, and I didn't take it until later. I shouldn't have put it up there because of the availability of this very issue you're talking about. It's a grain whiskey, Navazos Palazzi. It's from Spain, done in a Palo Cantado cask. Anywhere between $95 and $120, but they only do like 3 barrels a year. So 300 bottles, and it's at 53.5% alcohol by volume.
Eric, when you sent that nomination through, I was curious and I did a Google search on it, and I struggled to find obvious information straight away. And I thought immediately, I was like, his heather's been set alight by this thing. I wonder why he's put that forward. Tell me about it. So
it's 95% corn, 5% malt. I'm going by memory. It's actually made, if I recall correctly, at a Jim Beam distillery somewhere in Spain. I don't know the full story behind that. Only about 3 casks. This is bottle 605 out of 900. Okay, so 900 bottles, and that's for this particular.
So 3 casks sounds about right? I mean, 3 or 4.
3 casks for 900 bottles.
I'm a big kind of cask is it?
Pardon? Palo Cantado sherry. A Palo Cantado.
So okay, if it's a traditional Palo Cantado, it could just be 2 casks and 900 bottles out of 2 casks.
Yeah. So Palo Cantado, only about 2% of sherry production goes into Palo Cantado, which means the casks themselves are going to be extremely rare. So it's hard to find whiskeys, period, aged in Palo Cantado. I have a Bunnahabhain. That one's like $500 a bottle. I've got 2 of them. I might bring one to Texas. I
want to reach for my Palo Cantado that I have here, but it would mean me talking about something that's been nominated.
So anyway, I give this 95 points. It's going to be it'll be part of my top 10 for the year. Obviously not a nomination. And I thought about later, stupid me, it doesn't have the availability and the quantity. And the problem is, even some of the shops here in the United States that have it, they don't ship outside their local area. So even you find it on the internet, son of a gun, they don't ship to California. So then you have to try to find someone. By the way, you can find this in Indianapolis. I think we know some people in Indianapolis. You might be able to get this for you.
Yeah, but I know 4 guys in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
and some of them are overdue a trip to this side of the
and they
Atlantic.
have a big event coming up in November. They're going to have a big dinner, a big shindig. They've been talking about a lot. So it's coming up in November. So if you're going to go out and visit the Scotch for Dummies and you visit, it's Vine and Table. Check out Vine and Table. If you can get a bottle of this from Vine and Table, highly, 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 highly recommend it. It's definitely been in my top 10. All right. But now people get to, why do you talk about whiskeys that I can't get? It just makes me jealous. You know, whatever.
I know that, and it's really hard because we are getting, even despite our best efforts to try and include whiskies that are available and affordable and all these great things, you know, there's so much complexity to it that it's proving to be kind of difficult to really be, you know, succinct. And, you know, there's a balance between trying to guide what people vote, what people nominate, and letting them just vote for what's really got their juices flowing, what's really made them excited.
Right.
All we asked is that, look, guys, whatever you do, you know, you were part of it, Erik. You saw the communication that came out, and we tried to be as light as possible, right? We weren't going heavy-handed with restrictions or things. We wanted just to know what you had. The only thing we insisted on is that this is affordable. It represents good value for you. It's available and it's good quality.
But Roy, affordable
whiskey, it's harder, right? It's harder than you might imagine.
Affordable is relative, Roy. If I want a house in Isla, I can go buy a house in Isla. If I want to go buy a new car, I can go buy a new car. A lot of people.
Well, it is relative, and you know what? As I've gone back and answered comments on the live stream from last night during today, I've kind of picked up on how poorly I answered and how I commented on some of the things that we said last night. And for example, when we talked about gateway whiskies, there was a lot of people really upset that gateway whiskies, you know, these are all 46% and above. There's only one that's kind of gateway ABV and things. This is not gateway whiskies. And you know, we have to remember who we are and what we do. And affordability does come into that, and everything is relative, Erik. You're absolutely right. But when you start to go along your whiskey journey and you start to enjoy Scotch whiskey experiences, good quality whiskey experiences in Irish or bourbon or wherever it may be, your price of entry doubles immediately. You know, 25 pounds in my early days was considered an expensive bottle, and then it was 40, then it was 50, and then it was more and more. And when you start to chase flavor and you get more and more into it, so that's a huge complexity right there, because you do soften, you're tenderized by whiskey, and it makes you spend more. And I remember speaking to a brand ambassador who was talking about their drives. I'm not going to tell you who they represented, but it was their drives to bring younger people into the category. And I was aghast at the language they were using, because they just forget that young people don't have £40 to spend on one bottle.
And they're accruing student loans, and maybe they just got married, and maybe they got a new baby, and you know, all this other things that they got to pay for.
Yeah, and you have to. If you're going to target your whiskey to younger generation, and at the time we were actually talking about the millennial generation. It was a few years ago, I said, if you're going to target it to them, how can you justify your opening whiskey, your entry level age statement whiskey being £65? That will maybe tell you who the producer was. So the joining fee at that point, there were non-age statements that were a wee bit cheaper than that, £40. But the opening age statement product, the Kudos product, was a 12-year-old age statement at 40%, and it was £65 in the UK. And I said, is that how you're attracting millennials? Really? It was a surprise.
Let me ask you a question. I'm going to pose something to you. See if you agree with me or disagree with me. I don't believe I don't believe in gateway whiskeys. I think they're gateway whiskey people. I don't think people who have no interest in whiskey just go do, look at a store shelf and go, I think I'll try this. No, they meet a person. They're at an event. They're at a party. They're hanging out with someone. They're traveling, and somebody else says, have you ever tried this? And that's the gateway. Is somebody introduces them, not that they're just numbly bumbly going down the. Now there might be some people that do. They're not just going down the shelves and picking one out of the blue. Somebody introduced them rather than a particular whiskey just out of the blue. What do you think about that?
I think you're absolutely right. You're absolutely spot on. But what I would do is add a wee layer to that and say there's two things that we all need that coach to bring us in. We all need somebody that's going to switch that torch on and light the path ahead for us, encourage us in. You know, I always joke about bullying my friends and things, and that's not really true because I do try to be gentle with it, and I do try to encourage them without them feeling pressured. I want them to really enjoy the thing. So there ends up being a moment with a person in an environment with a particular whiskey, and all of these things may be incidental, but you're right, Erik, probably not. However, immediately after that moment, these people need to be able to go out and switch on their own torchlight and take their own steps and find their own whiskies. And they are not going to be whiskies at cask strength. They're not going to be single cask expressions. They're not going to be, they're going to need to be things they can grab in their local supermarket, their local, in the States, you know, North America, you would talk about liquor stores or whatever, things that they can grab that's not expensive. They don't feel that they're risking too much. That's going to be an ABV that's not going to be a barrier for them. Something that they can identify with, a particular style or whatever. So I think that it's really difficult to find terminology that everybody understands and interprets the same way, isn't it? So I may have used the words as in the description gateway. What did we call the title of it? Entry level, I think. Entry level.
Yeah,
and Ralph and I were talking. We negotiated over the names of all of these categories, what they should be called, right? So this was originally called affordable, and we had all these kind of beginner whiskies and all these crazy things. And we said, you know, we need to find something that is the most succinct title for it. And it's just so difficult. We originally had 6 categories and it expanded to 8 because we wanted to be inclusive, and we really.
Why did you put 20 categories in there? Why did you put 20 bottles in there?
Yeah, I know. It's and do you know the inevitability, Erik? Honestly, if this succeeds, were you one of the guys that suggested it's biannual instead of annual?
No.
Okay.
No, the funny thing is when you kicked this off, I was in the middle of moving and packing and starting a new job and all that stuff. So I was actually super busy, and it was actually difficult for me to change my focus to say, hey, I need to give some thought to this. Because I was so busy doing other stuff. So I gave it thought. I thought through everything that I reviewed and stuff and made my choices from there. But I kind of wish if I wasn't so busy with everything else going on, I would have given more thought and taken more time about it. But to answer your question, no.
I know how busy you've been. I mean, it's 2 huge moves for you in the last couple of years as well. I know it must have been you know, a lot of upheaval and things, a lot of distraction for you. And
I had to move all this stuff.
Yeah, well done to you. Well done to you for keeping the channel going through that as well. I know you had a wee break and hiatus, but honestly, I know how challenging it must have been for you. Yeah, I mean, I was wondering when I clicked onto the stream tonight, and the subjects that we're talking about are interesting, but when I clicked on and I saw the title, the secrets behind the online Scotch whisky things, you know, that's not clickbait. It's legit bait. You are actually going to talk about that thing.
But it is very tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you want to do is kind of bring people in, and you've been part of the process. Are you not struck by how, I don't know, how matter of fact and how it's just taken care of itself? I know that you don't see behind the scenes, you don't see how many people voted for what or whatever, but Ralphie and I have not had to intervene on anything. And there are comments coming in now about the fact that in the blended category, I know it's muddying the waters, blended malt and blends being in the same category. And that's something that grates against me, because I always talk about how malt and grain are not the same drink, right? They're two different things. So if you blend them, you're going to get... Anyway, it's in the interests of trying to simplify it as much as we can to test this concept in the first year. We can granularize things as we go forward. But right now we have to try and simplify it. And I apologize to the people complaining about the grain category and the blend category and various others too.
Roy, you are far too apologetic.
Well, okay, I shouldn't apologize, but let's say I understand the concern.
You're almost Canadian.
Yeah. Well, I think the Scots are responsible for seeding a lot of Canada, so maybe maybe that's, I don't know if there's a connection there.
I love you, Roy. You're such a gentleman. You always apologize for this. So I'm like, oh, Roy, don't worry about it, man.
Well, I think that I forget where I was going with that now. I was on a theme there to kind of, I was trying to be
about the blended and confusing the categories of blended malt and so forth.
Yeah, so some people were kind of coming back and saying, you've got 3 compass boxes in that blended category. 3 that's 50% is from one brand, and in the world whiskey we've got 2 redbreasts, right? And they were saying, why don't you have Powers in there? Why don't you have a Green Spot in there and things? And at the end of the day, it would have all been from Middleton. But they're right. The thing is that the irony there is that if we had thinned out the compass box entries or decided that only one redbreast could come through, the irony there is that we would have fixed it. So it's looking like it's fixed. Right. It looks fixed. But if we'd have changed that, it would have actually been fixed. So that is the consensus that the 24 channels found. That the 2 redbreasts were the most significant, and 3 compass boxes in the blended category. So we haven't gotten to one of the sections. If you don't mind, can I move on to one of those slides and I can actually ask some questions about stuff? You go ahead and talk about that. I'm going to grab a glass of water. Okay. And you can introduce it. Okay, you going to drop out or you staying on? No, I'll be here. Okay. Yeah. Okay, sorry. All right, next, best grain-based, best independent. So this was a challenging category for me, and I just explain why. So in my studies, I'm focusing on learning a distillery, learning their core range. I'll be doing a whole series of videos for a particular exam in which I will have to memorize the history and so forth profile of like 28 different distilleries, Scotch and otherwise. And so when you're getting into independent bottlers, which many times release whiskeys better than the actual distillery, you're not learning about the distillery, although they may be enjoying a fantastic whiskey. So the problem with me is my intentions and purpose for what I do is very different than what for the most part, everybody else is just doing whiskeys they enjoy and want to talk about. I'm on a particular path in a particular course of study. And so I don't do a whole lot of independence. So I've never had anything from Adelphi, although I'm familiar with the brand. I've had 1 or 2 Douglas Lang. I've had 1 or 2 Gordon MacPhail's. I've never even heard of North Star Spirits. I've had some minis from Signatory and Scotch Malt Whisky Society. I know there was some guff in the chat about Scotch Malt Whisky Society. Most of my exposure through for Scotch Malt Whisky Society has been through either with Roy, hanging out with Roy, in which we actually went to one of the, I don't know what you call the centers or restaurants, bars, whatever you want to call it. They're in Scotland. Or through Ben Dietrich, a fantastic representative. I haven't seen him around in a while. He's a fantastic. I think he has little kids now. They've all been fantastic. I've had samples. I did a whole. Actually, tell you the truth, I did an advent calendar. I was sent an advent calendar of nothing but Scotch Malt Whisky Society samples. So I actually did 25 days of nothing but Scotch Malt Whisky Society, and they were all superb. So my biggest exposure interaction is with Scotch Malt Whisky Society, but I kind of felt like I
don't really have a solid voice on this one because of my lack of interaction with the various other independent bottlers. One of these days, I will get around to focusing and studying. I'll do a whole 2 months on nothing but independence. But in the meantime, I don't have a particular strong opinion on all these or any other ones. And the main complaint about Scotch Malt Whisky Society is that you have to join. It's like a club, and you can't go to the store and buy one. Completely different model for branding and marketing and selling their whiskeys. And they don't even refer to themselves as an independent bottler. That's not how they view themselves, although in actuality, that's what they are. So, hey, what are your comments on that one?
Yeah, there are a couple of categories in this lineup that suffer more acutely than the others on distribution and availability. And when you get down into single casks or small batch fattings and things, you're not going to get a lot of distribution. And a lot of the bottlers that you listed there, Adelphi included, North Star included, even Signatory, decent sized, big scale independent bottlers really, really suffer from that. Scotch whisky is our thing. These awards are born from the Scotch whisky community, and one of the biggest dynamics in that category is exchanging casks and cask trading and brokerage, and that whole thing that gave birth to grocers and independent bottlers making their own or bottling their own casks of whiskey from distilleries. So not to recognize it seemed odd, but we understood that a lot of people might not be able to, like you've exactly summarized perfectly, not be able to comment on it, which is why we had to place the ability to skip and not vote. If they didn't feel they had experience, intelligence, or knowledge to share in a particular category, they could just skip it.
Right.
Which I think is exactly how you've summarized this category.
Right.
But to talk about Scotch and the Scotch community and not to talk about one of its biggest assets, I would say, its biggest, the way that we can enjoy so many distilleries that don't have official bottlings, the way we can have different takes on official bottlings, but through independence. To not talk about that in a Scotch whisky awards scheme or nominations seemed odd. So what we decided to do was include it, but give people the ability to just skip it if they didn't have experience to lead the category. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. So, by the way, first I got a quote here from Jonathan Flowers, someone whom we've both met. There's a funny story behind that. I'm looking for something I wanted to look up real quick.
Jonathan and Zan.
So, funny story. Most people probably don't know this. So, I was at a castle on the Kintyre Peninsula, north of Campbelltown, and it was a castle turned into a hotel. Absolutely beautiful place. And I met this couple in a bar, and they were on their honeymoon. And so we just started talking, and I think I ordered myself. I ended up ordering myself a Bunnahabhain 25-year-old, and I ordered them one. And so that other person that I met was Jonathan Flowers, I got a comment down there. He says, Erik Wait Whiskey Studies, you never went to Cadenheads while you're in Campbelltown. I know you're rushing, but yes, I did. I went to Cadenheads there when I was there in Campbelltown. I actually did a tasting there. And Roy and I tried to go to Cadenheads in Edinburgh, but they were closed when we were walking around. You remember that?
Yep.
So, anyway, so I'm talking to Jonathan Flowers and his lovely new bride there, talking to him, and I'm a whiskey tuber, and show him. I probably gave him a coin or one of my cards, or whatever. And he said, "Oh yeah, we were with this guy, and he's whiskey tuber." Da, 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 da. And I go, "Was his name Roy Aquavit?" He goes, "Yeah." And we're like, "Wow, we were just at his house. Oh, just at his house yesterday. Oh yeah, why'd his house? Oh yeah, what do you know?" So I mean, just kind of this odd thing. I mean, we're way over in Campbelltown, and yet these two people who had just had hung out with you just happened to meet at a castle on Campbelltown. Absolutely amazing story. So
it's really cool.
Jonathan, it's good to see you on there. It's amazing. A very small world. There's very few of us, and yet somehow we end up crossing paths. I thought it was just a really, really, really cool way to meet someone. And I think later on I sent them a coin and so forth. So anyway, I think they're back east somewhere. Anyway, Jonathan, thank you very much for tuning in.
I actually think they're in Alabama.
Oh, in Alabama. That's east. It's somewhere south. Yeah, it's in the south. It's in the east.
Okay.
It's east of the Mississippi.
Yeah, okay.
They don't grow wine there. They don't do really wine there, so I don't know. If they don't do wine there, then I really don't know my geography really well at that place. So let me bring up another slide real quick and make a comment about it and get your input. Now,
nice to see you, and Jonathan. I hope you and Zan are very well. Sorry, buddy. Go ahead, Erik.
Grain, best distillery, best independent, best new distillery. So this one, okay, this is, how do you define new? Because obviously a brand new distillery doesn't have anything in production. It takes a few years. So new is somewhat relative, but they got to release new enough to where maybe they have their first release, maybe their second release. They're fairly new to get on the market. I'm going to script the pronunciation. Ardnamurchan Distillery.
Yeah. Ardnamurchan.
So they're far northwest in the Highlands, correct?
Yeah, Western Highlands.
Yep.
Actually, the most western that you can be on the mainland, the Ardnamurchan Peninsula. Right. Maybe Nicknain is actually located further west than them, but yeah, they're very Western Highlands on the mainland.
King's Barnes, I've heard of it, never had it. Linsdore Abbey, never heard of it. Nicknain, I've heard of it, never had it. This next one, is it Torvig?
Yep.
Okay, I've never had it, and yet I can pronounce it, so you got to give me some extra points there.
Wonderful.
And then Waterford. Now, Waterford there are people who were moaning and groaning and complaining and whining. Of course, maybe I'm exaggerating their response. Let me take the slide off real quick. Dun-dun-dun-dun. My mouse died. I need to plug it in, so I'm having to do this manual. All right. So there were some complaints about Waterford. And even some of the fellow whiskey tubers were complaining that Waterford was on there. And my response was, it's not necessarily the whiskey in and of itself, but it's something they're doing. And so I've had Waterford. I was not impressed, but I understood in the context of New Kids on the Block. It needs some time. I think stuff was released too early, but it's someone who's in junior high, or a freshman in high school, you hear them play the violin and you go, okay, yeah, they're not going to play for the London Philharmonic. They're not going to play for the San Francisco Symphony. Got it. But I can see the potential in their ability to play. They will be something when they get older. That's my response to Waterford in terms of tasting the whiskey. And then in terms of how they're doing and the insane nerdiness and geekiness of what they're doing, that's why I go, okay, because of how they're doing things, they just haven't shined the way they will shine. But I think they got great things to come. But if I had to judge a blind tasting the whiskey in of itself, then I would agree with the complaints. So what do you think? Or are we talking too much?
No. So I am drowning in samples. There's so many whiskey samples around me, and it's difficult because you're trying to drink the things that everyone else can drink and drink all these really cool things that people send you to. Out of all the samples that I have, probably the most prolific sample bottles I have are Waterford samples. I don't know how that came about, but it such is the case. And as you sip through it, you're realizing that even at a very young age, Waterford is quite a divisive whiskey. Some people love it immediately and some people not so much. For me, I felt the same as you, that lots of it was confusing and hot at first. As time has gone on, I notice over your left shoulder there, Erik, you've got it looks like a single farm you have there.
Yeah, but that's one of the early releases, very early releases.
Yeah. So what you need to really start to look out for now is beyond the kind of experimentation and the kind of is to start to look at their cuvées and their more official or larger outturn releases. I think that's what's going to start to colour the landscape for Waterford a wee bit more. I feel the same as you. It's confusing and a lot of it's difficult. And yet a couple of them I've sipped recently are just... it's difficult because I don't want to... It's easy to overstate things, right?
Right.
I think in a few years' time, in line with your opinion, actually, Waterford will make the best Scotch whisky outside of Scotland.
Not Balcones?
Balcones will make wonderful whiskey,
Yeah.
but I think that's what the point I'm trying to make. Even Mirador and the peated and the things that Balcones make in a very Scotch homage way, and I don't mean that in a...
They're very distinctly Texas. They don't have the climate.
It's going to be different. It's going to be different, but
they don't have the climate
will make something that you will just taste as a very, very exquisite Scotch, I think.
Yeah.
I hope.
So Daniel and Rex, they've done at least 2 tastings of Waterford. One was an early one of early bottlings, and then they did another one that was of later bottlings with more age on them, and one of them was a cuvee. A cuvee is a blend. Rather than just this, I almost said vineyard, rather than just this grain or that plot of land, it was a cuvee of a number of different plots of land from barley. Barley's come from different plots of land. Rather than trying to focus on one particular barley, one particular land, it was a cuvee. And so look for that, the Whiskey Vault, Waterford. Check out one of the later videos. They visited the distillery. They were impressed. Daniel was particularly impressed with the cuvee, the blend, even though it's not reflective of a distinctive singular terroir or something like that of one particular region. He was really, really impressed with the quality of it. So I'm not necessarily going to rush out and buy another bottle right away, but I'm definitely somewhere on the radar within the next couple of years or so. I'm definitely want to check them out again.
I mean, what we need to remember, that most of the malt distilleries exist, and that one of the reasons in the awards that we've differentiated existing distilleries and new distilleries is that the dynamics that drive their existence are quite different things. Most of the legacy of Scotch whisky is built on the back of blending, and most of the new distilleries are built for single malt's sake. That I think that's quite clear, and you can see the way they're being presented and handled for that. And there's no... there may be some cask trading and thing goes on, but none of them are filling for contracts. Right. So what Mark Rainey and Waterford are doing is imagine that legacy of Scotch whisky where you've got all of these kind of different distilleries contributing different components to the flavour cabinet. What he's doing is he's using barley to build the basics of that flavour cabinet, all these different barley components that are just going to give him all these different things that he can do, and then layer them into different casks in order to give him all of these components to build what's essentially going to be a blended malt made of single malt, if that makes any sense.
Right.
So he can use his palette, his color palette, to paint any picture he wants to paint and release it as something like a cuvee.
Right.
That's his idea. So it's everything in house is going to be single blend. It's going to be single malt, of course, but it's going to be all of these vattings.
And that's a very wine way of thinking. That's a very Bordeaux, I would say, particularly Bordeaux way of thinking.
Which you can see his impact on Bruichladdich on Islay too, and very much the same way. That's why they talk about terroir. That's why they talk about the grain. And it's just as valid a discussion as Loch Lomond talks about distillation, or Glenallachie talks about fermentation times, or Glenfarclas talks about the importance of a sherry cask. All of it are vital components to making whiskey. So we can... I think the problem that Waterford had was this confusing, overly granular, super geeky. It's almost like all those single farm releases that would have been amazing as little tasting boxes, little 20 cl or 15 cl or 10 cl bottles that we could have tasted and compared, rather than having to buy full bottles of it all. So I think most of the distilleries that are out there that people are complaining about being too hot, let me tell you, if you tasted Springbank at 3 years old, you're not going to be a Springbank fan.
Right.
Okay? We need to put everything into context. All of these new distilleries are punching way above where they should be now at a very young age. And it's amazing through their manipulation of the spirit and cask and picking the right casks to release at a younger age, they're able to get cash back in earlier. But their long-term plan is much more immersive, much more complex, much more mature, much more rounded. And we need to give them all. We're all getting excited over Ardnamurchan right now. We're all getting excited over a lot of the new distilleries that are coming on stream. But this is a long-term thing. Waterford is definitely in it for the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm kind of curious. I would like to ask him. I don't want to make this whole Waterford thing. Given his age, who does he have in mind? The next generation, who's going to carry the flag, the banner, and for the next generation? Because he's laying stuff down, not for himself, but for 10 years from now for the next generation. He's thinking that far ahead. And who is going to be his? I'm wondering who his protege might be, who might then carry it on. But that's a whole nother discussion. That's a whole.
You're talking about Mark Rainey now, right?
Yeah.
No, Mark Rainey is immortal. He is. If you've ever been in his orbit, his energy is the energy of an immortal. He doesn't. That doesn't factor into his plans in the slightest. I don't think. His energy is huge, absolutely huge. I spent a day with him, and I felt like I'd been on the ropes. I felt, I took a camera, I took a recording equipment, I took a notebook and everything, and I was silent the entire day. I just tried to take it all in. I didn't record anything. There was so much. There were so many angles. There were so many. It was opening a can of worms. And so much of it is on the cusp of controversy. So much of it is things that I had never considered in whiskey. So much of it is that disruptive element that he brings. Wonderful to listen to, but anybody you speak to in the industry at any time, you need to always take away everything that they say and balance it out, because you're going to hear different takes. And It doesn't mean that one's right or wrong. It's just different angles on a similar practice.
But that's the kind of the people who make waves and get known. Okay, they also tend to be the innovators and people who are advancing things. They also tend to have the more critics and naysayers and people who did that.
Yeah,
you don't stick your neck out and do something without having someone throw a rock at you. Right? That's just the way it is. And going into it, you go, hey. This is the way I see things. I'm taking the Napa Valley in a completely different generation. I think we can be as good as the rest of the world. This is what Robert and Mondavi did. I'm going to leave my family, go down the road in 1966, start my own winery, and I'm going to travel around the world. Hey, Napa Valley is as good as the rest of the world. He was ahead of everybody else, and it was everybody else kind of going, "What's Robert doing? Hey, Robert did this. Let's try that." That's what was going on in the Napa Valley. And in a sense, Mark Rainier is doing the exact same thing. And I think eventually other people will follow. All right. I kind of want to move on.
Can I say a couple of things about Mark Rainey and Brooke Laddie? Because it's easy to throw criticism his way. Absolutely. And he's quite a divisive character. And he very, very much is direct and he speaks his mind. However, some of the things that's reached its way into Scotch whisky's modern lexicon comes from what was created this century from that distillery on Islay that he was involved in.
Right.
The amount of different expressions, the amount of variation to come from a single distillery, the amount of cask finishing, the transparency, the way that it was bottled at 50% ABV with natural statements on the bottle and the tube and all of these things, literally loggerheads with the SWA at every turn. All of that came from that disruptive nature you're talking about.
Right.
So even the people that really don't kind of get on with that kind of character, right, we are all capable of appreciating the positives that can come from these dynamics.
Right. But I find that historically true of Steve Jobs.
Yes.
I mean, look at it, Steve Jobs. Look what he created, what he innovated with the envelopes he opened. But look how many people he pissed off. And I don't think you have to be like that the way they did things, but it just tends to be that way. When you're super ambitious and you're visionary and you tend to go, sometimes you unfortunately run some people over in the process, verbally or otherwise. And so, but I always try to look at the pros and cons of everybody and the strengths and the weaknesses and appreciate what are the good things about them, and then forget about the rest. But mediocrity or playing it safe doesn't get your name known and doesn't advance freaking anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't like conflict. I don't like, I would prefer to avoid confrontation. But sometimes it's inevitable, and it's not, you don't seek it. It's just going to arrive. I mean, as the older I get, the harder I try to cling on to the concept of being able to try and see things from more than just one perspective. But it's hard because we're just humans. It's really hard, and we're driven by emotion, right? But you're absolutely right, is that these really controversial, divisive figures, they tend to be very effective at getting things done.
Yeah.
I want to
move on to the next. I'm going to move on to the next category because it's actually one which I'm glad you're here, because I just kind of I don't know about this. All right, let me bring it up real quick. Best world whiskey: Amroot Fusion Indian malt whiskey. So Roy, I added the United States prices. What I did was I looked at the lowest price and the highest price, and then I put the prices somewhere in the middle. So this is on average. And I use Wine Searcher as a search engine. Anyway, Amroot Fusion Indian malt whiskey, 50% ABV, fantastic whiskey. Balcones Texas single malt, 53 ABV, $70. Cotswold. I've not had a Cotswold yet. Odyssey Barley. I know Vin has done some great videos on this. Elijah Craig Barrel Proof. I got introduced to ECBP by Scotch Test Dummies. I really, really like it. Quality over the last year has been a little bit of meh, but really, really good stuff. The quality price ratio is there. High ABV, far under $100 in the United States dollars. So if people want to check out a bourbon, I tend to, hey, check this one out. Redbreast single pot, and then Redbreast 21-year-old and 15-year-olds. Now, here's where I have a little bit of a beef. World whiskey. And this, okay, by the way, I think these are all fantastic whiskeys. I've not had the 15 to 21-year-old. I've had the Lust Style Edition, the Cask Strength, and the 12-year-old from Redbreast. But all the rest, and I've not had Cotswold is the only one. In terms of I've had other Redbreast other than those two. Cotswold, in terms of the brand, is the only one I haven't had yet. But I know Vin has liked them. But anyway, so here's the issue. Let me get the image off of here. Give me a second. World whiskey. How do you define world whiskey? Give me two seconds. I've always thought of whiskey in this way. You have 5 major regions: Ireland, Scotland, United States, particularly bourbon, Canada, and Japan. Anything that's not of those 5 countries is world whiskey that don't have enough producers, enough of a profile to really establish themselves as being a distinctive nation. I mean, India, you've got 3 brands: Rampur, John Paul, and Amroot. Not enough to really be a whiskey nation, per se. All right. Tasmania, Denmark, whatever else. They might get there one of these days. So I always thought of world whiskey as anything that other than the big 5. And the fact that you put Ireland as a world whiskey, I'm like, no. I instead would have the thing about bourbons under grain whiskey as a non-malt. I understand how Scots see them. That is not how Americans see them. Okay, America. Okay, Kentucky is in the heartland of the United States. Bourbon is American. Bourbon it plays a big role in establishing case laws for the United States. In other words, a lot of this versus that, establishing how we're going to apply particular statutory laws, is based on old laws and court cases wrestling over bourbon. So I would do a complete category, just bourbons. And I know this is a Scotch Whisky Award. We already discussed that earlier. But we don't see bourbon as a grain whiskey. We see it as bourbon. And I don't see Ireland as a world whiskey. All right. I said my bit. Now you can respond.
I've been drinking water. I should have been drinking I should have been drinking my dram for this one.
You should have called up Ralphie and brought him in. We could have an argument and fight over this.
Yeah, I don't have my sidekick in this thing. I don't have him to kind of. The thing is here is that, and maybe we haven't made this clear enough. There is bias here at our core. There is no doubt. And there is perspectives here. And what we are trying to do is come up with awards that represent a certain category of whiskey aficionado. And that is the Scotch whiskey aficionado. That does not mean that we exclusively drink Scotch. We can be promiscuous and enjoy other categories of whiskey. But the community that is celebrating the OSWAs, the Online Scotch Whisky Awards, is born in Scotch appreciation. That's where we're founded. That's where we end up. Whatever brought us there, our groove is Scotch whisky. That's the community that we're talking about. Now, all of us enjoy all the other categories, and all the channels enjoy other categories as well. We don't want to encroach on somebody that wants to step up and call it the Irish Whisky Awards, the Bourbon Whisky Awards, the Canadian Whisky Awards, or anything. We want to work alongside them so that they can do their own grassroots thing and focus on something that's much more representative of their whiskey appreciation, because it's so huge and the diversity is so vast right now that it's all there to be celebrated. I mean, I think there's a huge mutual respect between like the bourbon explosion that's happening and various other world whiskies, including Scotch. But there are some things that define the two different categories as being a wee bit different. That's the first thing I'll say. The second thing I'll say is that in Scotland, we don't drink Scotch. We just drink whiskey. And if you order a whiskey, the expectation there is that it's going to be made in Scotland, but there is a chance that it's made in Ireland, and that's acceptable too. You know, there's a huge affinity between Scotland and Ireland. However, you'll quickly get into a discussion in a lot of environments where they will make they will differentiate between Scotch and Irish, and I think that exists in the other way as well. So you're absolutely right. Is that when we say world whiskey and we include everything in this huge bucket that is not Scotch, it's not very kind to a lot of categories that deserve their own definitions.
Right.
But you have to look at it from the perspective of we're coming at this from a Scotch loving community, and we want to keep it as simple as possible in the first year. There could be more granularity in the categories and definitions going forward, but in the first year, it has to be manageable. We have to test this thing. Not just test the appetite for an award system full stop, but to test how we can make it function in a way that's administratively manageable. So we always had to try, and we want to be inclusive. We want to recognize that there are other whiskies out there that exist other than Scotch whisky, but we cannot give a category for everything, because then it's not about us and it's not about what we love.
Right.
It becomes about trying to encompass everything in all the world, and it starts to encroach on other people's ability to do their own grassroots movement and talk about their own product. So it is brutally generalization of huge swathes of whiskey I don't want to apologize because you've corrected me already, but you understand where I'm coming from there. You can.
Don't go Canadian on me.
It's a bit brutalist, but that's where we are. So world whiskey in the OSWA definition is anything that's not Scotch.
Right.
And that's a bit cruel for a lot of categories, we understand. But you know what? If the Bourbon Awards came out and said, we're going to celebrate and then they came out and said, anything that's not bourbon, and Scotch was lumped in with Japanese and Irish and Tasmanian and Danish and whatever, I don't think we would take any offense at it at all as Scotch lovers. And we would celebrate a bourbon category as well.
So I guess in trying to ride two bicycles at the same time is what I think you're trying to do. We're Scotch people. We're going to talk about Scotch.
No, we're trying to ride every bicycle that's available for us to ride, but still be happy with our own bike.
So I think, and we went over this earlier. I think it might have been. This is my personal opinion. Whatever. Everybody's got opinions, and only mine matters. Is maybe just should have stuck to Scotch and not brought in any other categories. Or not use the word Scotch in terms of the title. Now, here's the thing. Let me finish one other thing. Comment is, one of the things I said, and I was buttering your bread earlier. You probably hadn't tuned in yet. I think Ralphie has a distinctive personality and gifts and ability. You have a distinctive gifts and ability that are very complementary and yet very different. You're a very kind apologist and evangelist. He is a pulpit pounder. He is like Martin Luther taking his 95 Thesis and posted it on the distillery door in Wittenberg.
Yeah.
Okay. He's the hellfire damnation kind of guy, almost.
Yeah.
To stay with the analogy. And I think it's that, but you're an artist. Okay. You're an artist. And so without you, Ralphie could not do this. But I think he's also sort of the let's do this. I think that's Ralphie. In my perception,
when I'm staring at something and saying we cannot do this, Ralphie's standing saying, "Shut up, you clown! Of course you can do this."
I know. And see, and the thing is, if you look at music. And great music, it's rarely by one person. It's often the best music is by two people of very different personality, Lennon and McCartney, very different personalities. And I say yes, and I say no. You say stop, I say go. That's like the lyrics to one of their songs. But it was that created great music. And I think that's...
Can I share a tale? Can I share a little story to illustrate exactly what you're talking about?
Sure.
When Ralphie came to me with this idea, he posited it as the OSWAs, the Online Scotch Whisky Awards. My gut reaction was, can we put the S in there? Can we put Scotch in there? It doesn't sit comfortably with me. So beyond the acceptance of me saying Graham Young's superb, beyond the acceptance of me saying I'm in, this is fantastic, let's develop this idea, we started to talk about what it should be called. And in time, I settled and I realized that Ralphie was right. The Online Scotch Whisky Awards is exactly the right title for it. It exactly represents our comfort zone, our knowledge, what's really got us motivated by this wonderful spirit that we enjoy. And it means that we can focus on that category, but be inclusive of others at the same time. Much in the same way that Whiskey Magazine Awards don't just celebrate whiskey magazines, right?
Cigars.
They don't only
in there too, yeah.
Yeah, it's their awards that they give out to other people,
right?
And it's
Wine Spectator also does restaurants as well. So yeah,
but it's still the Wine Spectator Awards, and they're not only awarding wine spectators; they're awarding whatever the category is.
Yeah, the restaurants.
So once I got over that, I went back to Ralphie and I said, "Ralphie, you know what? You're right about what this should be called. You're right. your idea of calling it the OSWAs, the OSWAs, is right. And Ralphie said, Roy, I've been thinking about your points about this, and I think you're right. I don't think we should call it the Online Scotch Whisky Awards. So it's exactly what you're talking about there. It's that kind of thing. We've never had a crossword. We've never fallen out. We've never had to park something and discuss it later. We've been able to tease it to a point. Ralphie's pragmatism is, Ralphie has an online persona that everybody consumes and enjoys and loves. But he has an ability to think about things in a way that is pragmatic and objective and bigger than the finer points of the subject at hand. He's thinking about things in context, and he's thinking about how things affect other things. So his pragmatism has often been a huge part of this. So when I say, as I said earlier, I don't think we can do this, and Ralphie's saying to me, don't be daft, of course you can do this, that's him applying that rationale, that part of his personality, right, to say, you know, don't get caught up, don't sweat the small stuff, and look at the bigger picture, that kind of thing. So I think that's what you're talking about there. I know I'm over-egging this a wee bit, but just to touch on what you've talked about there, I think that's exactly what's been happening in the background.
But it makes me think of, so when we were talking about, okay, the bourbon guys can do their thing and the Japanese whiskey people can do their thing, and the reason to bring it back to that is, and I don't know every bourbon tuber, and I don't know the full length and abilities of all the bourbon people.
There's millions of us.
I know.
We're, you know, whiskey tubers, we're as common as kneecaps these days, right? It's incredible.
I know. Yeah, it is. So the bourbon channels are growing like crazy. They're very entertaining. The bourbon junkies, I think the bourbon junkies, I suspect they got some influence from Jeremy Spears. I don't even know who he is or not. And I think they picked up some clues from the Whiskey Tribe. They're guys are funny, hilarious, great personalities. I think they do a great job. But are they someone with the gifts and abilities to take on a task of creating something parallel to what you're doing with Ralphie in the bourbon world? Maybe they do, maybe they can't, maybe no. I kind of think, this is just my personal opinion, that, or say Jason, and I kind of look at the personalities. If the bourbon world, now Daniel and Rex are not bourbon reviewers per se. They do a lot of bourbon, but if something was going to be done like this, the danger of Daniel and Rex doing something like this is it would come off as just another Whiskey Tribe, Whiskey Vault thing. They're too much in the public. And that's my 2 cents. They're great people, great, fantastic. But, and most people don't know this, is the genius behind the Whiskey Vault is Rex. It's not, Daniel's the nose and the palate and all that side. But in terms of everything else, it's Rex.
Well, the creativity, the vision, the energy for so much of it, the absolutely, I agree. Daniel, in many ways, which doesn't always make obvious sense, is the sanity, and he's the steady tiller, isn't he?
But behind, but the other thing is, because I've studied with Rex's father, Roy Williams. Behind Rex is Roy, and Roy is a genius. But anyway, so I'm thinking, okay, if the bourbon community was going to do something, how would they do it? And who could they come up with to orchestrate this, organize, and do it? And I'm just kind of going, could it be done? I have a question mark. I'd like to see it done. I would be really curious to see how it came about. I would like it to have the same balance and carefulness and parameters and approach that you and Ralphie are taking. But it would just be more on the bourbon side. Of course, it would be different because you have different people, different personalities. You know, the Rolling Stones are different than the Beatles. You know, both, I mean, just amazing bands coming out of the 1960s. I would be curious to see how it would be carried out. I would like to see, do any of them have the See, because maybe I'm an ageist. I'm looking at two older men with Ralphie and Roy than these young guys.
A lot of the bourbon channels are already kind of probably doing their own projects. I know that Chad and Sarah at It's Bourbon Night have quite a big event annually, that is specifically about the bourbon category, Bourbon Awards. So I think we are stepping into a space from our community where in the online space, sorry, I don't mean to say the online, I should really say the video space, it doesn't really exist as a cohesive thing right now. Ralphie's got his own whiskey of the year. Lots of other channels, including my own, we have a whiskey of the year or a producer of the year.
Right?
But we don't really have anything that's an event other than that. And what we've done with the Oswas does not exclude that. It doesn't cancel that. It's still those things still exist and they're still valid. So what the bourbon category would need is the same level of collaboration. And I think you're right, Erik. It would need somebody with somebody to kind of hold it all together, somebody to kind of, let's be honest, the final say in the Oz was the guy who's kind of nailed his reputation to the mast here is Ralphie. And he's going to have the final say on everything. So if he doesn't like the way that something's going, or he feel it some way compromises his ideas of integrity, he's going to enforce that it doesn't go any further. He's going to stop it going any further. So it would probably need something similar, I would guess, and I think that's what you're getting at, right?
Right.
It needs an obvious candidate. In Scotch, we had Ralphie as the OG YouTuber in that category.
Right.
So the fact that he's spearheading it makes perfect sense.
Right. Anyway, so let's move on to the next one. But I would say to any bourbon aficionados, all the bourbon channels who watch this, I'd love to see you guys do something. It'd be awesome. And I even said, if they want to do something, hey, Roy, we're thinking about doing a bourbon parallel to what you guys are doing. Can you guys help us out? Give us some tips, give us some input, feedback, yada, yada, yada. I'm sure you guys would be there to give them tips and suggestions on how to or arrange things.
Absolutely. We're all part of one big family, right? We're all just living in different rooms.
We're all one big part of one big asylum.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. This next one. This is in my personal opinion, the most. You don't have to be crazy to do this, but it helps. The two. Sorry, I'm cracking myself up.
I can suddenly hear my wife walking around. I know. I'm live. Yeah. I'll be up in a wee bit.
Hang out with Erik.
Yeah.
Right. I think the most
I've woken her up as I'm chatting into the mic and she's come down.
The two challenging categories is the very first one, which is best entry level. And I think this one, best Scotch single malt whiskey. I think these are the two, for me, my personal opinion, I think these are the two most challenging categories. One, because of what is entry level, and there's so much out there, and it's probably the number one asked question. Hey, I'm new to whiskey. This is probably number one asked question. I'm new to whiskey. What do you recommend? That is the most asked question out there. The other most asked question is, what's the best? Quality and quality price ratio, again, is going to come into this. So Aaron has shown itself again. This isn't the first time we've seen the Aaron 10-year-old, $66. That says something. The fact that Aaron has shown up twice. Glen Scotia Victoriana. I tasted this at the distillery. The first thing I did was I grabbed my cell phone. I went online. I'm at the distillery. Can I get this at home? That way I don't have to try to sneak it into my luggage. But it really impressed me. And as soon as I found out, yes, I can get it back in the United States. I can get it at my local place in the Bay Area. I was living in the Bay Area at the time. Then I don't need to try to bring one home. Glen Alecky, 10-year-old. Glen Alecky is probably now got the most buzz in the whiskey tuber world than any other Scotch whiskey. I have not gotten to it yet, but I've seen the bottles around. I probably should be buying them and sticking them on shelves just in case they disappear, so I can have something to review later. But it's on my list to visit in my next trip. The Frog 10-year-old sherry cask. I just bought a bottle of this, but I have not pulled the cork on it yet. 48%. I'm a big lover of Lafroig. And I'm a big lover of sherry cask, as everybody knows. I just did a long series on sherry cask finest whiskey. Longrow Campbellton is on the map again, an 18-year-old. I've not had the 18-year-old. I've had the mostly, my focus has been on the reds, the wine casks. Talisker 18-year-old, absolutely spectacular whiskey. I got to brag. I actually picked one up for about $80, but I got sort of a friend's discount. So it's 140 USD. I think this is a very, 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 very difficult list to choose from. Man, ooh, you look at that one, that one, that one, that one, yeah, that one. To me, this is one of the most difficult lineups to choose from after the best entry level whiskey. So, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm biting my tongue because
I know.
What I want to do is not to talk about any of the specific whiskies or cast opinions on them, which is hard. In terms of the category, most people are working out that this is a 2-tier awards system, right?
What do you mean?
We've got the channels coming together to, without their knowing, you were part of this, Eric. We did not tell you what the second step would be when you completed the first step.
Right.
So you sent your nominations in for each of the categories.
And I thought that would be it.
Yep. Ask 24 channels for 24 answers to 8 categories. You're going to get 24 answers for each of the 8 categories. So what we immediately did once it was completed is that we compiled it and sent it back out to all the channels and said, here's what you voted for. Now you have to vote for your top 3, pick 3, but you cannot vote for your own, right? You can testify that that's exactly what happened.
Right.
And everybody then had to go in and click on their top 3, but they were not allowed to vote for their own. Unless, if 5 people have voted for Springbank, and somebody goes in, then of course you can select Springbank because somebody else has voted for you as well. So as long as you were not voting for your own, you could send it back. And that's what happened. And everybody played the game absolutely to a T, very, very fairly. And it all came back in. And what that did is that the top 6 just took care of themselves then. They just floated to the top. And we had consensus on the top 6 so that Ralphie and I did not need to intervene on anything. So what you see here in all the categories are just what's come about. So that's the first tier. That's the channels, these people that you look to on YouTube for guidance or purchasing decisions or opinion or whatever it may be. We've stepped up and said, this is what we pick. But now it's over to you. So the second tier is that, the 6 whiskies are out there for each of the categories or the 6 distilleries, whatever it may be. People are maybe going to start to pay a bit more attention to that, and maybe they're not. The people who are not have the ability to feed back to us through the People's Choice thing to say you've missed something. Or you've got something and I'm voting for it and I'm going to duplicate it by writing it in here too. So let's say they're Springbank, to use as the example again. I've clicked on Springbank and I agree with that. So I'm going to write Springbank in the People's Choice. So then what Ralphie and I are able to do with the second tier thing is announce the winner, but also draw attention to the fact that the community have spoken and told us that we have missed something. Just look at the live chat from last night. Why is Cadenhead's not on the independent bottling list? Why are Kilchoman not in the best distillery? It's already coming out. They're being very vocal about what's missing. So we want to celebrate the things that have won.
But we also want to was a lot of people were upset about Rasse not making a list.
Well, that makes perfect sense, right? That it's one of the new distilleries. Let me tell you that Rasse, as you well know, was nominated.
Yeah.
But they didn't make it through to the top 6. That wasn't my decision and it wasn't Ralphie's. It's just what happened with the 24 channels getting together. So that is what it is. And as brutal as it is for me, my picks didn't always get through as well. A couple of my picks have made it through, but a couple of my picks, I drank them last night. Loch Lomond didn't get a shout last night. Glenturret didn't get a shout. Anok didn't get a shout. These are things that I love, and I've found huge valuable experiences with in the last year that haven't made it through. It's just the way that it goes. However, I am able to go into the People's Choice and write Anok, write Loch Lomond, and write Glenturret because of what they've achieved in the last year.
Yeah, we're not in a two-party system like just your choice between Republicans and Democrats. There's a lot more than that.
Well, what we're hoping that we can do on the 6th of November is have the ceremony and see the nominations for this category where, and the winner is this.
Right.
Yay, let's congratulations, and here's your comments about that. However, here's some interesting feedback from the community. The community were talking heavily about this, and they were talking heavily about the next thing. They were disappointed that they didn't see this. That is just as valuable as anything that an online commentator, an Erik Wait, a Ralphie, a Roy, or whoever it may be, can contribute. Am I right?
Yeah, but the funny thing is, so, I mean, who was the first one to land on the moon? Okay, now who was the second person to land on the moon? People don't remember the second. Neil Armstrong, they don't remember the second person. And I think that's sort of the thing that people get their feelings hurt that they didn't make a list. But, if you have 130 distilleries, with that's on the average 5 core range bottles, I'm just pulling numbers out. They can't all make it. They can't all be there. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. Now, and each whiskey tuber, you have 24 whiskey tubers. The math would be easier if you had 25, but let's just, for the sake of argument, let's just say it's 25 or 24. That means I only have 4% influence. If out of the 100 whatevers, I'm only making whatever I put in is only 4% because I got there's so many other different candidates, so many other voters are contributing to it. So there's no way I can be bought off and have a huge influence on things because I only make up 4% of the vote. There's all these other whiskey tubers, but also the fact that you have such that number of whiskey tubers doing it or contributors is what you see is what is on average representative of what this. If you had just 2 people voting, 5 people voting, 10, okay, but you got 24. That means this is what was coming on the radar of everybody out there. The only challenge is, how many videos do you do per week? How long have you been a whiskey tour? How long have you been whiskeys? I probably do 70 whiskeys a year, give or take. I've been doing this for 6 years. Do the math. 70 times 6, 420. Plus things I've tasted that I've never reviewed on videos and that kind of a thing. But I'm going to tend to only recommend that which I've gone through, not just when I had a sample at someone's house or whatever. So as I go through the list, there's a lot that I haven't had, and there's going to be a lot that other people haven't had. So you can only recommend what you've had. And if I haven't had Rassay, I can't recommend it. I can't go to I can't find it. The funny thing is I've actually met the owners of Rassay. Never heard of it. I actually bumped into them in Edinburgh. But anyway, if I haven't had it, I can't recommend it. Sorry, it doesn't come on my radar because I've never had it. And I haven't had it because your stuff doesn't make it here or whatever else. But the fact that it's even mentioned and people are getting upset. Wow, people are upset. You know what I need to do? I need to go visit them. I need to go get some of that because they didn't make the list. They're actually grabbing my attention more than some that are actually on the list because there's so much other.
It's the exact same thing that happened with Kilhoman for Best Distillery. There was vocal outrage. Cadenhead's never made it for Independent Bottler. Outrage. Kilkerran 12 never made it for Best Scotch Whisky or Entry-Level Whisky. Outrage. This is happening in the background. We know, listen, when we put these things together, Ralphie and I could see exactly what was going to happen. We knew these things. We knew how it was going to be reacted to. But it is what it is. If we wanted it to be Ralphie and Roy's top 6 list, that would have been easy to put together.
Right.
So,
I've
but it
already
had
told
to
people
be.
if Ardbeg doesn't win anything, I'm quitting. I'm not drinking whiskey anymore.
Well, Ardbeg's in with a strong nomination. Honestly,
Yeah, the very first category. The very first category.
yeah,
Best
Ardbeg is
introductory.
in, and you know, it's what's really quite interesting to me is that despite a strong bias towards natural presentation, kind of more independent, you know, distilleries and products, we still have entries in there from Beam Suntory. We have entries in there from Diageo. We have Edrington. You know, I think the only one that may be missing is Pernod Ricard. I'm not aware of a Pernod Ricard brand that's made it through. Christopher Malloy saying, "Yeah, Glenn Keith didn't make it." Yes, exactly. I think that's exactly what I'm talking about.
So, what would you in terms of like best introductory? One of the challenges I thought was, is a peated whiskey really an entry whiskey? Given the general people might, I know some people, hey, they've had a peated Scotch and they liked it right away, but a lot of people don't.
Well, I talk about it at length, how, you know, the biggest weapon I've used to convert people to Scotch whisky in my personal life, my friends, ends up being an Islay whiskey, whether it's a Lafroig or a Lagavulin or an Ardbeg or another.
Oh, wow.
It's that thing because what happens is that it's very rare that you pour a whiskey for somebody that doesn't know what whiskey tastes like. They've tasted whiskey before, okay? And they associate the flavor with whiskey flavors. However, if you put down, and I'm speaking about perhaps a Scottish context here, sure, but if you put down a Lafroig, a Lagavulin, or Ardbeg or something, one of the Kildalton 3 or another powerful peated whiskey, and you ask them to taste it, immediately they taste things that are bigger and bolder and more engaging than what they're used to tasting in just standard pours of whiskey. So they believe immediately in this hook, this idea that there is more to whiskey than just whiskey flavor as they see it at that time. Some people, that's a sweet bourbon cask, vanillas and coconut. Some people, it's a sherry cask with dried fruits and spice. For other people, it's peat. And the most powerful flavor for me has been Lafroig, Lagavulin, Ardbeg, that style of whiskey that's converted my friends into enjoying it.
Interesting.
There's Ben Diedrich. He's in our chat. You were asking about Ben earlier. He's just completed an 8-hour marathon live stream with. They ended up with a blind challenge between Jeremy. You were talking about Jeremy and Dan and Sean from Bourbon Junkies competing together. That's what kept me up so late tonight. I was watching that. So this is how I've ended up here. It's nice to see Ben in here.
So Ben, if your ears were burning earlier, I was talking about you a little bit.
Richard Agnews pointed out that Middleton Redbreast Pernod Ricard. Good, Richard.
Okay.
They're all in here. They're all in here. Maybe then that means that the only one that's missing is Inverhouse, which I'm sad about. Annock never got a mention. Speyburn never got a mention. Balblair, Old Pulteney, Balmenach, Inverhouse never got a shout. But Edrington did. Quite surprised. Sorry, Eric. Sorry, continue.
Anyway, so if people don't know who Ben Dietrich is, he's an ambassador for Scotch Malt Whisky Society. And in general, whiskey ambassadors don't impress me. Reps. Ben does. He is a whiskey enthusiast first, and a representative of Scotch Malt Whisky Society second. And his love for whiskey in general really shines through. And a real nice gentleman. We met a couple of times, bumped into each other a couple of times. So anyway, Ben, good to see you, and hope you and your family are doing well.
He's just a nice man. He's a nice man.
And got cute kids. I've seen pictures of them on Facebook and so forth. So I think we've gone through all the slides, basically covered everything I think I want to talk about. We're coming up on 2.5 hours. It's a wee early in the morning or late in the night for you. I don't know which one it is.
Yeah, it's a holiday weekend here and we have no plans, so it worked well. I couldn't resist the clickbaity thumbnail when I saw it. And I jumped straight in. So thanks for the invite. I don't know if I've been able to clear up anything.
No, it's been really, really good. It's good to bounce things off back and forth. I've been truly blessed by you coming on, sir. A little ticked off. I didn't get to go to Scotland this last year due to the pandemic and stuff. I'm hoping and planning. The biggest thing, if as long as Scotland is open, I'm hoping to be in 22. The main thing is new job, new place, new work. Is I'm so busy at work related. But my goal is to be back in May, and then again in May 23 for exam. May 22, I don't think I'll be taking any exams. But I think then in May 23, I'm hoping to take these Master of Scotch exam with Charlie McLean and a bunch of others as being on the committee.
That'll be a treat. Yeah,
but we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes.
Do me a favor and pull up Donner Pass Whiskey's comment there.
Okay. Gotta find him. Where'd he go?
It's saying, Eric, let the man go to sleep. Oh. I'm here at my own.
There we go.
It's a pleasure to be here, honestly. It's nice to hang out. I was awake and full of adrenaline after.
So are things tentative with you being at the Bashers Ball this year?
Very, very, to the point that I need to make a decision this weekend. So the airways opened up, or the announcement that the airways over the Atlantic have opened up again for general travel, but that's not until November. Ooh. So I have got lots of hoops to jump through and things in order to be able to go, and I have to justify it as necessary and essential travel, which we all know is disingenuous. So I need to look into it a wee bit further. You could argue it as my job and all of these things.
Right.
So I'm looking into it now, and I have to make a decision this weekend. Yeah. I'm going to be devastated, Eric, if I can't get to go. I'm going to be so.
So Bill, the Whiskey Dictionary, he just announced that he's not going to be able to go. I don't know if it's business or family or what else he's got going on. I'm scheduled to go. I plan to be there. I'm kind of curious about the weather. The first year they had it, I wasn't there. It was in July, and that was too hot. The last time when we had it, which was 2 years ago, was just September, and the weather was good but constantly changing. You had to bring a sweatshirt and an umbrella, but then also wear shorts and a T-shirt because it could change the name up. But I think it went fine.
Scottish weather. Yeah,
very strange. Well, Texas is all over the place. I'm a little worried it's going to be a little late in the year, that we're going to be hitting the right smack dab in the beginning of the rainy season. That's my one concern. The COVID stuff, I'm not worried about so much. Flying, I've been flying for business recently, and it's been fine. I've not had any problems with it. Got all my vaccinations. I'm not worried about so much. I'm worried about the weather is the biggest thing, but we'll see how it goes.
Well, let's see. I mean, if I could be there, I know it would be as amazing as it has been in the past, and it's all a wonderful event and things, but it ends up being so much about the people.
Yep,
it's just
absolutely
fills you so full of positivity and gratefulness to be alive, and that's kind of the biggest reason I want to be there. Yeah, Eric, I'm going to raise this wee glass of a alternative. I've been sipping rum all night.
Oh.
Yeah, it's been delicious too. Really delicious. Quite high strength rum as I check it out. But I'll say thank you very much. Thanks for your trust and being part of this thing. Thanks for your questioning and your critical analysis of it. I think it's valid and I think it needs to be talked about. But more than anything, thanks for your vote of support and your pragmatism that you realise the intention behind it, and we're doing our very, very best. And if we do fail, it's because we've happened up across something that we didn't expect. We are just trying to kind of represent our wee community as best we can. Anyway, buddy.
The reality is, Roy, we know that this is all a cover-up. This is all things been orchestrated by the Illuminati to cover up the truth that has been hidden about ancient alien astronauts being the inventors of whiskey. And this whole thing is just a cover for that. And you and Rafi need to come out and tell the truth.
Is that what I missed at the start? Is that the opening?
Yeah.
I missed? I'm going to go back and watch it now. Buddy, it's great to see you. And can I just mention, it's nice to see your entire face again.
And I had my hat on.
Yeah, yes, a tinfoil hat. Oh, fantastic. Erik Wait, let's raise a wee glass of Foursquare at nearly it is 3:30 in the morning.
All right, so I'm going to tune on. Thank you very much, sir, for tuning on. I want to thank everyone for watching. If anybody is watching this on the replay, if you have comments, if you have questions, put them down below, and I will try to get them. If anything specific of Roy, I'll try to forward it to him. I'll put a link to the Oshawa website down below. I also put a link to Roy's live stream. If you haven't watched his live stream, I've watched it twice. I will watch it again over the weekend, probably at least once or twice. You got to watch just for Ralphie's rants. But anyway, so I highly, highly recommend it. It was absolutely great. And cheers to you and Ralphie for doing all this. And you were dearly loved and missed, sir. Sanjiva.
Thank you so much.